For 8 long years, the young boy rubbed his ear every single day. Doctor after doctor gave the same cold answer. There's nothing that can be done. His father refused to accept it. He spent millions on treatments, crossed continents on private planes, begged the world's top specialists to take one more look. Every time, they walked away helpless. Then one day, a housemaid noticed something everyone else had missed. What she discovered deep inside the child's ear would shock everyone. Oliver Hart was a powerful billionaire, private jets on standby, luxury homes across the globe, money beyond imagination. But none of it mattered, because his son, Shah, was born unable to hear, 8 years old, and not a single sound had ever reached him. Oliver chased every possible solution, from elite hospitals to world-renowned medical centers like Johns Hopkins, hoping someone, anyone, could change his son's fate. But again and again, the answer was always the same: nothing could be done. From Switzerland to Tokyo, Oliver left no stone unturned. He consulted specialists who charged thousands of dollars an hour. Tests, scans, endless procedures, every single one gave him the same crushing verdict: irreversible. You have to accept it. But Oliver couldn't. Shah was his whole world. His wife had died giving birth to this boy, leaving him with nothing else to hold on to. So Oliver pressed on, spending more, traveling farther, praying harder, desperate for a miracle. What he didn't realize was that the solution wouldn't come from a hospital or a renowned doctor. It would come from the woman he had just hired to keep his mansion clean. Victoria, the new maid, 27 years old, no medical degree, no specialized training, just an ordinary woman, who was about to make an extraordinary discovery. Victoria had no medical credentials. She was just working to cover her grandmother's nursing home bills. But then she noticed something about Shah, something every top specialist had missed, something lodged deep inside his ear, something dark. One evening while Oliver was away, she made a choice that could save Shah's life. Or ruin her own. What happened next? You really need to witness it for yourself. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. This story is about to get unbelievable. Sometimes a story finds you at exactly the right moment. The Hart Mansion stretched across 40 acres in Connecticut. From the outside it looked perfect. Georgian columns, sunlit windows, gardens trimmed with military precision. Step inside, though, and the silence hits you. Not calm, not peaceful, heavy, suffocating, like grief had settled in, and no one had put it to rest. The servants moved through the halls like shadows, speaking only when necessary. Their footsteps were soft, deliberate. They had learned quickly. Mr. Hart demanded order, precision, and above all, control. The mansion was quiet. No music drifting through the halls, no television humming, no laughter echoing from room to room, just an almost tangible silence. And in that silence, a father was slowly drowning in grief. Most evenings, Oliver Hart sat alone in his study, eyes locked on the family portrait above the fireplace. There she was, Catherine, his late wife, her smile captured forever in oil, her eyes still bright, still full of life. Beside her, a younger Oliver, hopeful and complete, and between them, little Shah, only 3 years old at the time of the painting. Before Oliver could fully grasp it, Oliver's heart ached, knowing his son would never hear his mother's name. Catherine had died the very day Shah was born. Doctors called it complications. Too much bleeding, not enough time. Oliver held her hand as the light left her eyes. She tried to speak, her lips moving silently. But no sound came. Just like Shah, the guilt ate at him. If he had chosen another hospital, if he had demanded better care, if he had been paying closer attention, maybe she would still be alive. Maybe Shah's life would be different. But it was too late, and Oliver carried that weight every single day. The weight of guilt pressed on him like a stone he couldn't move. The only thing Oliver knew to do was pour more money into the impossible. Millions spent on the world's top specialists, flights across oceans, hotel rooms more expensive than most people earned in an entire month. Every doctor he consulted said the same thing. Your son's deafness is congenital. There is nothing we can do. You must accept it. But how could he accept that his boy would live in silence forever? How could he bear the thought that Shaw would never hear his father whisper, "I'm here, son." "I'm sorry. Your mother isn't here." Oliver refused to give up. He kept searching, kept signing checks, kept praying that somewhere, somehow, someone would have a solution. What he didn't realize was this: the answer would not come from a specialist, a hospital, or a private clinic. It would come from someone he never would have thought to notice. A woman stepping through his front door, carrying nothing but faith and unpaid bills. Her name was Victoria, and she was about to turn everything upside down. Victoria Dyer arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning in October, unaware that her life, and Shaw's, was about to change forever. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds, the kind that made the world feel weighed down. Victoria stood at the gate of the Hart estate, gripping her bag tightly with both hands, trying to calm her racing heart. This was it, her last shot. Back in Newark, her grandmother lay in a nursing home bed, the bills stacking up on Victoria's kitchen table like a tower ready to topple. 3 months overdue, that's what the notice said. If she didn't pay soon, her grandmother would be moved to a far worse facility. State-run facility. The kind of place where people were forgotten, where no one held your hand, where you became a number instead of a person. Victoria couldn't let that happen. Her grandmother had raised her, taken her in after her parents died in a car crash, when Victoria was just 11. She had fed her when the fridge was empty, prayed over her when life seemed unbearable. That woman deserved more than a cold room and strangers who didn't care. So Victoria accepted a job at a billionaire's mansion, determined to do whatever it took to help her grandmother. Victoria didn't care about the mansion's grandeur, the wealth, the fancy address. None of it mattered. She just needed the paycheck. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, greeted her at the door. Stern expression, piercing eyes, the kind of woman who saw everything and excused nothing. "You're Victoria?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. You'll clean. You'll stay quiet. Keep to yourself. Mr. Hart doesn't tolerate disruptions, especially near his son." Victoria nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" Patterson's voice sharpened. Because the last girl didn't. She tried to get too close. The last girl had thought she could befriend the boy. Thought she could make a difference. She was gone within a week. Victoria swallowed hard. "I'm just here to work, ma'am." Mrs. Patterson studied her quietly for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. "Good. Follow me." As they moved through the mansion, Victoria kept her gaze low, but she couldn't ignore the details around her. The silence so heavy it seemed almost alive. The servants gliding through the halls without a word, without a smile, and the weight in the air that clung like fog, refusing to lift. And then she saw him, a small boy standing alone, unaware that his life was about to change forever. A small boy sat on the marble staircase, carefully lining up his toy cars in perfect order. He didn't glance up. He didn't acknowledge anyone. His shoulders were slightly hunched, and every movement was precise, deliberate. But what really caught Victoria's eye was something else. The way he kept touching his right ear just briefly, almost like a nervous habit, and the tiny grimaces that flickered across his face each time he did. Victoria felt her chest tighten. She had seen that expression before. She said nothing, keeping her pace steady, but her heart whispered that something was terribly wrong. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore. She had to pay attention. Days passed. Victoria went about her chores, mopping floors, wiping windows, folding linens, keeping her head down just as Mrs. Patterson had instructed. But her eyes kept drifting to Shah. Every morning followed the same quiet routine. The boy would sit alone in the sunroom, surrounded by model airplanes and puzzle pieces. His world was small, contained, safe. No one disturbed him there. The other servants steered clear of him, not out of malice but out of unease, as if his silence was something fragile, something they might accidentally shatter. How taken his hearing with her. Superstition, that's what it was. But Victoria noticed something else entirely. She saw a child drowning in loneliness, a boy who sat by the windows, pressing his tiny hand against the glass, watching a world he couldn't fully join. She saw the way his eyes followed his father when Oliver passed by without a word, how his small shoulders slumped just a little more each time. She watched how he touched, to notice, Or maybe they had stopped noticing a long time ago. One afternoon, Victoria was dusting the hallway near the sunroom when she spotted Shah struggling with a model airplane wing. His tiny fingers couldn't make the piece fit. Frustration creased his little face. She knew she shouldn't interfere. Mrs. Patterson's warning echoed in her mind. But before she could stop herself, Victoria knelt down and gently took the wing. With careful hands, she helped fit it into place. And for a brief, quiet moment, they simply stared at each other. Then something changed. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. Victoria's heart melted. She smiled back and gave him a small, tentative wave. He waved in return. That night, Victoria lay in her bed, thinking about that small wave. It seemed so simple, yet it meant everything. The next morning, she left a little surprise on the stairs where Shah always sat. A folded paper bird, simple and carefully crafted from scrap paper she'd found lying around the mansion. But in its place was a tiny note, written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you." Victoria pressed the note to her chest and closed her eyes. Whispering into the quiet, she said, "Lord, please show me how to help this child." She didn't realize it yet, but God was already answering, and the answer would demand everything from her. Over the next few weeks, a quiet transformation began. Victoria and Shah started communicating in their own secret little language. Small gestures, hidden signals, subtle exchanges that only the two of them understood, wrapped in gold foil. In return, Shah left her drawings of airplanes. She learned his unique signs, not the formal ones his tutors had taught, but the ones he had invented himself. A tap on the chest meant he was happy. Pointing to the sky meant he was thinking about stars. Pressing both palms together meant he felt safe. And slowly, he began using that last sign around her. Safe. Victoria treasured it above all else. But not everyone in the mansion was pleased with their growing connection. "Seen you with the boy," she said, her tone cold and cutting. Victoria's stomach sank. "Ma'am, Mrs. Patterson's voice was sharper than glass. "I warned you. Mr. Hart has rules. Staff do not get close to Shah." "I'm not trying to cause trouble," Victoria replied softly. "He's just lonely." "That's not your concern," Patterson snapped, stepping closer. "You're here to clean, not to mother that child, not to fix what cannot be fixed." Victoria bit her tongue. Fix what cannot. In this house where the boy lived, they'd all given up. "If Mr. Hart finds out you've been interfering, you'll be gone. No references. No second chances." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were ice. "Think about that." She walked away, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown ticking down to some inevitable judgment. That night, Victoria sat on her bed, staring at the blank wall. Her thoughts raced. Her grandmother, the mounting bills, the paycheck she so desperately needed. And then there was Shah, his tiny, silent world, and the fragile trust they were beginning to build. She remembered the dark thing she had glimpsed in his ear. Mrs. Patterson's warning echoed in her mind. Fix what cannot be fixed. But what if it could be fixed? What if everyone had been wrong? Victoria clutched her Bible tightly to her chest. "Lord, I don't know what to do. I can't lose this job, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing." She sat in the stillness, waiting for an answer. None came, just the weight of a decision she wasn't ready to make. Outside her window, the moon hung low in the night sky, casting its pale light over the mansion, as if urging her to choose. A war was brewing, between what she needed to survive and what she knew was right. She didn't realize it yet, but that inner battle was about to reach its turning point. Because the very next morning, everything would change. Morning came cold and still. Victoria was sweeping the hallway when she heard it. A soft thud, then silence. She froze, listening. Another sound, faint, muffled, like a small cry. Her heart leapt. She followed the noise to the garden door, and there he was, Shah, sitting on the stone floor, struggling, unaware that his life was about to be touched in a way it never had before. Against his right ear, his face twisted in anguish. Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. He was crying, but no sound came, pure silence. Victoria dropped the broom and ran to him. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Shah, Shah, look at me," she whispered. His eyes opened, red, wet, full of pain. Victoria gently signed, "Your ear?" He nodded, more tears spilling down his face. Victoria felt her chest tighten, as if it were being crushed. "Can I look?" She signed carefully, her voice barely a whisper in the quiet hallway. Shah hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing his small face. But then he leaned forward and signed back one word: trust. This child, who had been examined and poked by doctors his whole life, was trusting her. Victoria swallowed hard. She gently tilted his head toward the morning light and looked inside. There it was, deep within his ear canal. Something dark, dense, and glistening like wet stone. Her breath caught. It was bigger than she had imagined, clearer than ever. How had every doctor missed this? Victoria's mind flashed to her cousin Marcus, who had been deaf for 6 years because of a similar blockage, and the simple procedure that had changed his life. Her hands shook as she signed slowly. Shah, there's something in your ear, something that shouldn't be there. His eyes widened in alarm. She continued, we need to tell your father. Panic swept over him. His hands flailed, frantic. No, doctors, please. They always hurt, never help. Victoria's heart clenched. She understood now. 8 years of specialists, procedures, and endless pain with no relief had taught him that help only brought suffering. She took his small hands in hers and looked into his tear-filled eyes. I would never hurt you, she whispered. Never. Shah stared at her. Slowly, his breathing began to steady. The fear didn't vanish completely, but it softened, just enough. Victoria stayed with him until the tears dried and his hands stopped trembling. Then she rose and walked back inside, her mind racing. She knew something crucial. Something had to be done. He'd do. Tell Oliver. He'd call in more specialists, the same ones who had missed it for years. Do nothing. Watch this child suffer in silence. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. God doesn't always send help in fancy packages. Sometimes he sends it through people with nothing but willing hands. Victoria closed her eyes. Her hands were willing, but was she ready to take the leap? Barely eat, barely sleep, barely think. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. That dark, stubborn mass lodged deep inside Shah's ear, blocking everything. And she saw his face. The pain etched into it. The silent tears he could never voice. On the 3rd night, she sat at the edge of her bed, Bible open in her lap, but the words blurred. All she could see was Marcus, her cousin, deaf for 6 years, written off by every doctor, until someone finally paid attention. One procedure, one moment of care. Victoria's hands shook uncontrollably. She knew what she had seen inside his ear. She knew. But who was she? Just a maid, no degree, no medical training, no right to touch the boy. If she was wrong, she could go to prison. If she was right. But Oliver discovered she acted without permission. She could lose everything, her job, her income, her grandmother's care. Lord, she whispered, her voice cracking, what do you want from me? Silence answered her. Only the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall filled the room. Who had died at 14. He had been sick for months, complaining of pain, yet they couldn't afford doctors or proper care. She had watched him fade, struggled to breathe, tried to speak words that never came, and he died in her arms, silent, just like Shah's world. That day she had made a promise to herself, a promise to God, never again. She would never stand by while a child suffered. But this was different. This wasn't her brother. This was someone else's child, and the stakes were higher than ever. Nobody. Victoria closed her Bible and stood, walking to the window. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the gardens. Somewhere in the mansion, a little boy slept, burdened by pain in his ear and silence in his world, and she was the only one who had noticed, the only one who had seen. God, she whispered, I'm scared. I'm so scared. But if this was the task he was asking of her... Her voice trailed off. She thought of her grandmother's words, her hands willing, and took a shaky breath. Prepares the called. Victoria wiped her tears and made her choice. If Shah showed pain again tomorrow, she would act. She would trust what God had placed before her, even if it cost her everything. She climbed into bed, her heart racing. Sleep refused to come, but peace did. A deep, heavy peace. The kind that settles in when you've made a decision and stepped forward in faith, trusting that God will meet you there. Morning was coming, and with it, The moment that would change everything forever. Quiet. Victoria was folding linens in the hallway when she heard it. A sudden thump. Her heart skipped. She ran toward the sound and found Shah lying on the floor, curled up, both hands pressed to his ear, his face twisted in silent agony. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but no sound came. Victoria dropped to her knees beside him. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." She gently cradled his head, tilting it into the soft lamplight. And there it was, the dark mass, now clearly visible, glistening, stubborn. Victoria's hands shook. This was the moment. She reached into her pocket and carefully pulled out the sterilized tweezers she had taken from the first aid kit 3 days ago. Just in case. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps. "Lord," she whispered, "guide my hands, please." Shah looked up at her, wide-eyed, frightened, yet trusting. "I won't hurt you," she signed gently with one hand. "I promise." He nodded slowly. Victoria steadied her trembling hands, took a deep breath, and her fingers brushed the dark mass. Dense, sticky, stubborn. She hooked it gently and pulled. Resistance. Her heart pounded. She tried again, slow and deliberate, and then, release. Something slid free, landing in her palm, dark, wet, organic, years of buildup that had blocked his hearing all this time. Victoria stared at it, stomach churning, but before she could react, Shah gasped, a real audible gasp, loud and sharp. His hand flew to his ear, eyes wider than she had ever seen it before. Then he pointed at the grandfather clock on the wall, the one that had been ticking all his life, the one he had never heard. His mouth opened and a sound came out, rough, broken, unpracticed, but real. "Tick," he whispered. Victoria's tears fell freely. "Yes, baby. That's the clock. You can hear it." Shah's whole body trembled. He touched his throat, feeling the vibration of his own voice. His eyes shone with wonder, a world he had never known opening before him. Shah's mouth opened again. One word, the very first real word he had ever spoken. "Dad." Victoria sobbed, pulling him close, holding him as he trembled, overwhelmed by the sudden flood of sound that had entered his world for the first time in 8 years. "You can hear," she whispered into his hair. "Thank you, Jesus. You can hear." Shah clung to her tightly. Then, footsteps, heavy, fast, approaching down the hallway. Victoria looked up. Oliver Hart stood in the doorway, pale as death, eyes fixed on his son, on this miraculous moment he had never imagined. What have you done?" His voice shook, reverberating through the hallway. He rushed forward, pushing Victoria gently aside, gripping Shah by the shoulders. "What did she do to you?" Shah flinched at the sharpness of the sound, but then his mouth opened. "Dad, I can hear you." Oliver went rigid, every muscle frozen. "What?" Shah reached up, touching his father's face. "Your voice. Is this your voice?" Oliver's knees gave way as the reality hit him. Before he could process any more, the room was filled with the sound of a father and son discovering a world they had never known. Eyes landed on Victoria's hands. The blood, the tweezers, the dark mass resting in her palm. Terror replaced wonder. "Security!" he bellowed. 2 guards appeared instantly. "Get her away from my son." Victoria's heart broke. "Sir, please, listen to me. I didn't hurt him. I helped him. Look." She held out her palm, showing him the blockage. This was inside his ear. This is why he couldn't hear. I removed it." Oliver's gaze hardened. "You're not a doctor." Shah screamed, actually screamed. "No, don't take her." The sound of his own son's voice, loud, desperate, real, stopped Oliver in his tracks. But fear still gripped him. "Take her to the security office. Call the police." Victoria didn't resist. As they dragged her away, she looked back at Shah. "It's okay," she mouthed. "You're going to be okay." Shah's sobs filled the hallway, loud, messy, the first sounds of grief and release he had ever made. At the hospital, emanations. Oliver paced the hallway, mind reeling. His son, his silent boy, was speaking, hearing, responding to sounds. It seemed impossible. A nurse approached him. "Mr. Hart, the doctor needs to speak with you urgently." Oliver followed her into a small office. Dr. Matthews sat behind the desk, face grave. "Mr. Hart, I don't know how to say this. Just say it," Oliver replied, heart pounding. The doctor slid a folder across the desk. "This is your son's scan from 3 years ago." Oliver opened it. There, in the images, lay the truth. Now, recommend immediate removal. Oliver felt his blood turn to ice. "Someone saw this?" he asked, voice tight. Dr. Matthews nodded slowly. "It appears so, but there was no follow-up, no procedure scheduled. Your account was flagged under ongoing treatment protocol." The words hit Oliver like a bullet. Ongoing treatment protocol. They had known, they had seen the blockage, but left it there. Why? Because his money was too good. Because his desperation had blinded them to his son's suffering. Dr. Matthews said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Oliver's hands trembled. All those years, all the millions, every specialist shaking their head. They had lied. And the one person who had told the truth, who had actually helped Shah, was sitting in his security office, about to be arrested. Oliver stood abruptly. "Where are you going?" the doctor asked. Oliver didn't answer. He had a maid to find, and a lifetime of apologies to give. She wasn't praying for herself. She was praying for Shah, praying that his hearing would hold, praying that his father would finally understand, praying that the boy would experience what it felt like to live in a world full of sound. The door opened. She looked up. Oliver Hart stood there. But he wasn't the same man who had stormed in an hour ago. His eyes were red, his face lined with exhaustion and guilt. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse and rebuild in a single moment, softly, almost reverently. She stood, voice trembling. "Mr. Hart, I can explain." "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't explain, don't apologize, don't say a word." He stepped closer, stopping in front of her. And then the billionaire, this man who commanded empires, fell to his knees. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. "The doctors knew," Oliver continued, voice cracking. "They saw the blockage years ago, and they left it there. I trusted them. I trusted credentials, degrees, and expensive hospitals. I threw millions at my son's problem and never once stopped to truly see him." He looked at Victoria, eyes full of awe and disbelief. "But you did. You saw him. You saw his pain. You paid attention when no one else bothered." Victoria's own tears fell. I just loved him, sir. That's all." Oliver shook his head slowly. "No, that's everything." He stood, taking a deep breath. "I've spent 8 years trying to buy a solution." Victoria wiped her eyes. "God uses the willing, Mr. Hart. That's what my grandmother always said." Oliver nodded slowly. She was right. Together, they walked back to Shah's hospital room. The boy sat on the bed, headphones on, hearing music for the very first time. His face was full of pure wonder. When he saw them, he pulled off the headphones and ran straight to Victoria, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered, joy spilling from every gesture. Victoria knelt and held him close. "You were always worth hearing, baby." "Always," she whispered. Shah pulled back and looked at his father. "Dad, I can hear your heart. It's beating fast." Oliver sank to his knees, pulling his son into his arms. For the first time in 8 years, Shah heard his father cry. Victoria, standing quietly beside them, finally let herself exhale. God had answered her prayer, not through money, not through medicine, but through willing hands and a heart that refused to look away.